The Braves are about to start a new series against the Athletics in Truist Park. This is your 10-minute scouting report for tonight's game. This is your Braves Today Scouting Report, a production of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm Lindsey Crosby. In the next 10 minutes, we're breaking down everything you need to know before tonight's first pitch. It's the Braves and the Athletics at 7:15 p.m., so let's get into it. Both teams have announced their lineups for the game. For the Atlanta Braves, it is the same lineup you saw on Friday. The top, Ozzie Albies moves into the number 3 spot. It worked last time Walt Weiss did this because Ozzie hit a home run in the first inning on Friday. Jonah Heim checks in behind the plate, batting 8th, which allows Drake Baldwin to DH. Eli White is in place of Mike Yastrzemski in left, batting 6th, and Michael Harris moves back to his traditional number 9 spot. The real interesting one to me is the Athletics lineup. This is something where they're trying to make Nick Kurtz into a leadoff hitter. First baseman Nick Kurtz is batting first. Catcher Shea Langoliers, former Brave, is batting second. Tyler Soderstrom in left field, batting third. DH Brent Rooker is the cleanup hitter. Shortstop Jacob Wilson, who is a very contact-oriented bat, might be a better fit at leadoff. He's batting fifth. Lawrence Butler, Atlanta native, good friend of Michael Harris, is playing center field and batting 6th. Max Muncy, not that Max Muncy, the other Max Muncy, batting 7th and playing 3rd. Jeff McNeil, former Met, is playing second base and batting 8th. And Carlos Cortez is playing right field and batting 9th. Couple thoughts here. One, again, Nick Kurtz. Mark Kotsay is trying to make Nick Kurtz into their version of Kyle Schwarber, right? The big power bat that can draw walks that leads off, and it's not working so far. We'll see if they keep doing that. This outfield is probably the least optimal defensive outfield that they could make, right? Soderstrom in left, Butler in center instead of right, and Cortez in right. I would imagine if they have a lead late in this game, they're going to sub in Denzel Clark for defense, simply because, he is a very, very good defensive bat. He just can't hit worth a lick. He's like Nick Allen, but in the grass. And then the other note here, Carlos Cortez is a switch thrower. He's a natural lefty. He throws lefty in the outfield. When he plays in the infield, mostly third base, he throws with his right hand. It doesn't really matter as far as the lineup, but it's just a fun fact, and I wanted to share it. Braves are starting Bryce Elder in this one. We know who Bryce Elder is. The whole big thing here, we'll go back to his picture for a minute because it has a nice ginger beard. The whole thing here is his locations have to be really good. We know that his stuff isn't the best caliber of stuff, like Via Stuff Plus, but the locations matter a lot. Over the plate, in the zone, last year he had a 10.6% whiff rate. Out of the zone, 47.6%. And the slider was kind of the example of this. He barely exceeded 10% in the zone, and that's only in the bottom third. If he lands the slider in the middle or upper third of the zone, it's a 7% whiff rate. But when he gets guys to swing at the slider outside the zone, 63%. I want to see him mix in the four-seam fastball a little bit more. He also is experimenting with the cutter again in the spring. I'm curious to see, does he legitimately throw the cutter all the time, or is that just an emergency break glass option if he can't land the slider that day? When it comes to Jacob Lopez, couple things you need to know about their starter. The first one here is that he doesn't throw very hard. His fastball averages about 91 miles an hour, but he still does a lot of stuff well. He gets really good extension on it. And so because of that, the velocity plays up a bit. He gets a surprisingly high strikeout rate for being so low velocity. It's a fastball, almost equal usage of a slider, followed by a cutter, a changeup, and a sinker. On a handedness perspective, it's really interesting to see what he does versus lefties and versus righties, because clearly, like, it is different stuff here. For a lefty, you're seeing mostly four seam slider. That's predominantly just about all of it. He'll mix in the cutter when he is behind in the count. 2-0, 3-1 our fastball counts, but it's not always guaranteed to be a four seamer. Conversely, for the most part, outside of 0-1, if and even then, really, he is doing it some. If he gets ahead of you, he is throwing you sliders to get that whiff. 2-2 is kind of the exception. He's pretty much likely to do just about the same percentage of sliders and four seamers, slightly favored towards sliders, but it's all about that first pitch. You're over half the time he's throwing you a four seamer on the first pitch, and more often than not, see the thickness of the 0-1 bar versus the 1-0 bar. More often than not, he's getting that first pitch strike, and when he does, now he's going to go slider heavy. Righties do see a much more varied pitch mix. On like the first pitch, 40% four seamer, but 27% slider, and then more than 10% of everything else: sinker, cutter, changeup. When he gets to 1-0, it's the changeup's the most frequently thrown pitch, but right behind it's four seamer slider. The only real times outside of the usual 3-0 where you see it, where you always see guys throw fastballs, the only real place that he gets predictable to a righty is when he gets you, if he gets ahead of you 1-2 and he's got some balls to burn, he's going to throw you sliders out of the zone. But outside of that, and then 3-2, it's predominantly going to be slider, looking for the whiff, but it's probably going to be in the zone, so you have some opportunity there. Just really kind of interesting to see how much more limited he is versus lefties than he is versus righties. Do want to make sure we look. Oh, also another note here. He was one of the worst pitchers in the league last year at inducing ground balls, second percentile mark of 28.6%. So you're going to get balls in the air. Don't hit them into the wind like you did on Sunday. If you can pull them towards the chop house, you could get a couple home runs tonight off of Jacob Lopez. Only 3 Braves players have seen him in a game. Mauricio Dubon's 2 for 5, Jonah Heim's 1 for 2, Mike Yastrzemski's 0 for 2. Let's look at the pens real quick. For the Braves pen, Didier Fuentes clearly would have been down. He was optioned to Gwinnett this morning. Jose Suarez or Martin Perez are going to take his place. One of those two will be available out of the pen tonight. The other one is the likely starter for Tuesday. And I would imagine the Braves would consider bumping Chris Sale back a day and using the other one. If you don't pitch him tonight, one starts on Tuesday, you could use the other one on Wednesday as the other starter to wrap this series up. Dylan Lee, I would imagine if they can, they'd like to stay away from him. He's pitched 2 of the last 3 days. And part of the issue we saw with him last year when he got really homer happy, had some homer issues in the back half of the schedule, it was his largest workload of his career. 74 appearances, 68 1/3 innings. They may try to stay away from him and go to Aaron Bummer as the first lefty out of the pen tonight. But theoretically, he should be available if they need him. Everybody else is available. Want to point out, Raisel Iglesias has not yet pitched in a game. This is the 4th game of the season. So even if this is not a close game, they may try to get Raisel Iglesias an inning just to give him some work. On the flip side here, some of y'all left a comment that you'd love to see the opposing bullpen. Let's look at the A's bullpen. JT Ginn did the same thing as Didier Fuentes did on Sunday. He came in after the starter. He finished the entire game. So he kind of saved the pin. But outside of that, they have 2 of their high leverage arms who pitched 2 of the last 3 days, including Hogan Harris, the only lefty in their pen. So that's a scenario. If they are intent on not throwing Hogan Harris tonight, that means they don't have a lefty available. So they may still try to get him into this game, even though he's at 36 pitches in the last 3 days, simply because he's the only lefty option they have. They don't have a set closer. They're kind of rotating around. Harris and Barlow are the 2 main leverage arms. But this bullpen already, 12 and a third innings this season, 7 runs allowed, 5 of those are earned, 3 losses, 2 blown saves. They've walked 7, they've struck out 7. This is one of those games where, like, if you get into the bullpen, good things are probably going to happen, knock on wood, because the A's bullpen has not really been able to to reliably get outs and shut down opposing offenses. The Blue Jays walked them off twice over the weekend. Both of those losses I guess technically all 3 losses were pegged to the bullpen, but 2 of those were blown saves for the guys in the pen. I like Atlanta's chances tonight. It's all going to come down to, can Bryce Elder keep this lineup at bay? I do really like the A's lineup, but this is a scenario where I also don't necessarily know how successful Lopez is going to be, both from a stuff perspective and a keep the ball in the yard perspective, given that he's an extreme fly ball pitcher. That's your Braves Today scouting report. If you want the deeper analysis, lineup breakdowns, and everything behind the numbers, make sure you're subscribed to Braves Today. Enjoy the game. We'll be back after it with the postcast over on Locked On Sports Atlanta and today's 3 things over at bravestoday.com.